that we're tracking nationally and internationally. The big focus, of course, is on the Prime Minister's 3-day visit to the United States. It's officially kicked off because early this morning, our time, about 2-3 a.m. is when the Prime Minister touched down in Maryland. So he's currently in Washington, D.C., packed schedule ahead for him, and it's a very important visit, the first high-profile tour of the Prime Minister since the onset of the pandemic. Now, we've been getting you details here on India Today about the significance of this visit, the fact that the Prime Minister is going to be meeting Joe Biden for the first time since he took oath as the US President. So a number of issues that will be discussed. The Prime Minister touched down in Maryland, as I mentioned. The usual buzz that you see around the Prime Minister's visit, with this huge crowds, the Indian diaspora all gathered, very excited, trying to catch a glimpse of the Prime Minister. You saw only a sneak peek of that, a snippet of that, because of the fact that, we're dealing with the pandemic. Crowds didn't gather in large numbers, but they were there at the airport to welcome Prime Minister Modi. He was seen briefly also interacting with them, waving, shaking hands, going ahead and indulging some of them in selfies. So you saw all of those scenes playing out at the airport. Right now, today, on the first day of the Prime Minister's visit, there will be a number of crucial meets that we're going to be looking out for. Number one is, of course, he's meeting with the US Vice President Kamala Harris. He's also going to be holding a number of bilaterals. One of them is with the Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. The other with the Japanese Prime Minister, Yoshihide Suga. Both are very important because of all that's happening currently in the world, the Afghanistan crisis, China's aggression, etc. All of this will be discussed in the bilateral. So these are bilaterals that are happening because these world leaders are also in America for the Quad Summit. But before I get you details of the Quad Summit, let me just tell you that today, the first day of Prime Minister's visit, you're going to be seeing, Kamala Harris's meeting, as I mentioned, the two bilaterals with Australia and Japan, and then you also have the Prime Minister meeting with top CEOs. 5 CEOs have been handpicked, all of course of multinationals, and the Prime Minister is going to be spending 1 hour with each of them. Again, very important because this is not just about diplomatic but also business interaction. So the Prime Minister will be speaking to them on how really to boost investments to India, and there will be a number of discussions in that regard because each of these interactions with the CEOs is going to be happening for 1 hour each. That's the amount of time that's been dedicated for this. With the Prime Minister, you've got a very high-level delegation with him. The External Affairs Minister, S. Jaishankar, is also in America. He's not with the Prime Minister currently. He's in New York for another meeting of foreign ministers. The NSA, Ajit Doval, is there. Foreign Secretary Shringla is also there with the Prime Minister. So that itself tells you how important this particular visit is. On day one, you've got this packed schedule, as I mentioned, of bilaterals, of the meetings with CEOs. Day 2 is the day that everyone's going to be watching because that's when the Quad Summit meet is going to be happening. So in the Quad, you have India, you have Japan, Australia and America. This is the first in-person Quad Summit meet that's happening, and the timing of it is very crucial because of what's happening again, Afghanistan, China and the Indo-Pacific region. The fact that we are there in the Quad Summit along with Japan and Australia, there's going to be a renewed focus on these issues of the challenges that we're facing in our borders, about maritime security, climate change, in the pandemic, vaccine distribution. All of that will be brought up, and there's no doubt that China will be watching very warily what is the outcome of the Quad Summit meet, because it's going to have a direct impact on them and the kind of aggressive stance they've been using with all of their neighbors, not just us. So that is something that will be discussed, especially because the United States is also keen on kind of countering China for the kind of aggression they've been showing towards America as well. This meeting will have all of the top leaders coming together, and then there's also on the second day the very important bilateral between Joe Biden and Prime Minister Modi. I had mentioned in the beginning of this broadcast how this is the first time that the Prime Minister is in the United States since Joe Biden took charge. So there's going to be a number of issues that will be discussed. We've always enjoyed good ties with America. That no doubt will continue with Biden as well. But there will be a number of issues that are particularly brought up. One of them, of course, is something that impacts you and me greatly, not just on the vaccine front, but also about international travel, how to really boost that, about education, considering that for Indians, many of them who go to the United States for studies, all of this will have direct impact. All the talk that happens between Prime Minister Modi and US President Joe Biden. And then you have the United Nations General Assembly. That's on the last day. So the Prime Minister from Washington, D.C. Will head to New York for the UNGA. There he's going to be addressing the General Assembly. Expect a lot of the focus there on terrorism, on border intimidation, on territorial integrity, climate change. All of that is going to be brought up by the Prime Minister in the UNGA address, another big headline event. So this is why we're saying that, it's a jam-packed schedule, 3 days where you're going to be expecting a lot of big takeaways as well. I also want to highlight for you how late last night, you had an event called the COVID Global Meet. This was chaired and hosted by US President Joe Biden. It happened on the sidelines of the UNGA in New York. The Prime Minister also gave an address. It was a video address. He wasn't there in person. But the important headline that came from his address was on vaccine racism. And keeping in mind what's happening with the United Kingdom, it couldn't have come at a more appropriate time, where the Prime Minister has said that, look, we need to ensure that the world comes together and recognizes that the vaccine drive is moving smoothly and must recognize vaccine certificates from different countries. It's an important message that is put out in light of the United Kingdom doing what they've done on the vaccine front. For the uninitiated, let me just tell you that as of now, the current travel rules that are there and that come into effect, the next travel policy that comes into effect on October 4th, that mandates that Indians, despite being vaccinated, will have to go ahead and undergo a mandatory 10-day quarantine. A lot of outrage followed. The government took it up with the UK. And what prompted the UK to go ahead and do a partial U-turn is that they said that, okay, Covishield is approved, considering, ironically, it's manufactured and developed by AstraZeneca and Oxford University in the United Kingdom. So the least they could have done is recognize that. And they decided to go ahead and do that. They recognized it, and then they still didn't exempt Indians from a 10-day quarantine. They said that this was because of certification issues. As bizarre as it sounds, there's no clarity whatsoever on what certification issues mean. This is being ironed out right now, but keeping in mind that that's happened and the government is want of reciprocal action to the United Kingdom and to their citizens, Prime Minister Modi's message is very important. He said that all countries must honor vaccine certificates. It doesn't make sense for some to say there are certification issues like the United Kingdom. He's saying that recognizing a vaccine certificate mutually between all countries is something that helps everyone. Technically, it eases international travel, it boosts crumbling economies. So his message was very simple on that front. Go ahead and ensure that all vaccine certificates gets a nod, not do this, kind of stop some countries, allow others, allow some vaccine certificates and don't allow some others. So the Prime Minister's message on that has been very clear. Let's see if there is at least a rethink on that front as far as the United Kingdom is concerned. That's the story we're tracking very closely because it impacts us so direly at a time when international travel is opening up. A quick reminder there that the United States is also going to be coming out with its list of approved vaccines. Covishield hopefully will be on that list. There's no doubt that the Prime Minister's visit to the United States is going to also have an impact on that. The government is going to push to ensure that international travel to the United States for Indians, fully vaccinated Indians at least, is eased. Those are stories that we're tracking very closely this morning. Another national story that I just want to touch upon is on all the political developments happening in Punjab. The Congress is facing a huge crisis there. They appointed a new chief minister, hoping maybe that things would ease up. That's most definitely not the case. Captain Amrinder Singh has again spoken out, and this time he's gone ahead and also taken on the Gandhis. His message is that the Gandhi siblings, Rahul and Priyanka Gandhi, are inexperienced and that they're ill-advised. And this is because of the fact that the Gandhis have very openly taken a side in the turf war that we saw. They chose to side with Navjot Singh Sidhu. Now, all of this is given to speculation as to exactly what Captain Amrinder Singh's next step is going to be. Is he actually going to choose another party? The BJP, of course, is trying very hard to woo him. But is that something that we can expect? At this point, there's been no reaction that's coming from the Congress High Command as well. There is a chance, perhaps, that, even if Captain Amrinder Singh doesn't decide to jump ship, it could be that the Congress goes ahead and takes that step after his resignation, that they decide that, look, he's going on these public outbursts, so they could take action against him. That's a story with all the political twists and turns that we're getting you the latest updates here on India Today. Those are the top stories you need to know. Remember that you can stay tuned to us here on India Today for what's happening on the Prime Minister's US visit. We've got our reporters on the ground who are getting you the latest comprehensive updates on exactly what's happening and the big headlines. A number of key takeaways that you can expect over the next few days as the Prime Minister meets with several world leaders. That's all I have time for in this broadcast. Thank you very much for